Good morning. Welcome to our second episode of MASpresso. MASpresso is Moss's English version podcast. It's our latest pilot project, and we hope to welcome you and keep the conversation flowing. So today we'll be discussing several topics, local topics as well as international, that were kind of dominating the scenes lately, both on social media and news platforms. And today I'm joined again by Dr. Benjamin Camilleri and Mr. Jake Muscat, and I'm Juanita Galia. So the first topic we'll be discussing today is the recent controversy that sparked when it came to Stella Maris College. So a new shop is opening opposite the school grounds, right next to the opening, if I'm not next to the entrance, if I'm not mistaken. It's going to be a cannabis shop. So there were the signs put up and everything. The school administration itself has been outspoken about this. They have even released a letter condemning this project, and there were also several parents online voicing their concerns over the opening of this new shop. So we can start with your thoughts about this. Would you like to start?
Yes. I think, first of all, and Dr. Benjamin can correct me about this, I think that the law with regards to where these cannabis shops can open states that they shouldn't be within 50 meters of school areas, I think.
I don't know whether this one is within 50 meters or not.
Exactly,
so
that was
I really
just
don't know.
opposite the
that
road
was my
on the other
point.
pavement. if I'm not mistaken.
However, I think that besides the legal point, I think it also comes down to, first of all, the common sense of whoever wanted to open this shop. I don't know if it occurred to him that, first of all, he's opening close to a secondary Lasallian school there, Stella Maris College in Gżira. And I don't know if he knew that it was a school. I don't think it's difficult to figure out that it's a school. But on the other hand, what's more worrying is that, and this is something that I noticed also on social media, is that a number of people, not all of them, but a significant amount, seem to think that there is nothing explicitly wrong with a cannabis shop opening besides a secondary school. Some arguments, for example, would go like, for instance, well, the secondary school students already know about cannabis, it's nothing new for them, or something of the sort. However, that's not the argument, It's like saying secondary school students know about prostitution and that it exists, so that's an excuse to open a brothel next to a school. It doesn't make sense, the argument. I think that the headmaster and the school director for the brothers schools in Malta had signed a letter, I think.
Yes.
And they actually posted it on their Facebook page. I'm not sure exactly to whom it was addressed to, because I didn't read all of it. However, I think from there end they did a good thing in objecting to it. I don't know how much their objection will be heard, though, because as we know in Malta, business and money seem to have the absolute final say in things, even besides this small cannabis store next to this secondary school. However, the worst thing I think is precisely that next to a secondary school there will be a cannabis shop open, which, well, even those who are not interested in cannabis, students who are not interested in cannabis, either they start seeing the secondary effects of people who may be smoking within the vicinity.
They're exposed to it after
They're
all.
exposed to it. And also, I think even the message that's being sent in general to society, when it's as though there is nothing wrong with opening a drugstore next to a church school, because that's what it is. It's a drugstore, effectively. it doesn't bode well, I think, on where society is
It's
heading,
heading.
so to say. So I think that, in truth, it's sort of a moral societal issue, this, or one of the effects of our moral degradation as a society, so to say. I don't know if there will be a sort of more effort to have it moved, for example. I don't know if it will work, because I think the shop is about to be open very soon. So all the paperwork might be already done. However, yes, I think it's a very negative side effect of the society that we're living in, that this day and age it's perfectly acceptable for a cannabis shop to be opened right next to a secondary school. And the worst thing about it is that the objection had to come from the school itself, when I'm pretty sure that whoever submitted the application to open this store, I think the regulations are quite strict on how many stores there can be opened, and what items they can sell with regards to cannabis. However, I'm pretty sure that the authorities who approved it knew that there was a school next to where it was going to open, and the fact that nobody from the authorities, the civil authorities, objected to it in the first place is it's quite concerning, and to a certain extent damning as well.
In fact, the authorities took action to remove the advertisement. There's no mention of what is going to happen to the shop. And the biggest irony, perhaps, in all of this is that the advertisement will be removed, but now everyone knows about the shop far more probably than they would have had this whole thing not happened.
Free advertisement in a way.
Free advertisement. And one may ask whether this was all intended or not. If they knew that this advertisement would cause this uproar and would be clamped down upon by the authorities, then why did they do it? I don't know, but the free advertisement is very lucrative, I'm sure. And something that caught my eye, and which I really didn't like about this, I mean, I like nothing about this whole story, but something in particular that I really felt sort of out of place, was a comment made by the authority for the regulation of drug use, of cannabis use, which was to this effect. So they said the advertisements have been removed, and it reiterated its commitment to safeguarding the principles underpinning Malta's cannabis reform, insisting that the reform was never intended to promote normalization. Now, this reform basically is the legalization of cannabis. Obviously, now it is legal to consume it and to possess it. Okay, within certain limits, but it's
effectively granting.
Yes.
One has to see
you have the right to
whether those limits are
make use
enforced
of it.
as well.
Exactly. But this particular comment that this reform was never intended to promote normalization is, in my opinion, very banal, because it can be used to justify everything, this line of reasoning that, okay, let's just decriminalize this particular bad thing. We know it's bad, but let's remove all legal limitations that restrict its use. But we don't intend to normalize it. We just want to stop criminalizing people. We just want to make it less difficult for people to access
Normalizing it effectively.
What if that is not normalization? Then what is normalization?
Exactly, yes,
That is my big question and gripe about this. And this can also be applied to abortion, for example. We hear it all the time that people advocating for abortion say, no, all we want is to decriminalize it. That's all. But what is the difference between that and normalizing something? Between removing the legal obstacles to access, in this case, drugs, okay, and to possessing them and using them, and normalizing, quote unquote, to use the word used by the authority. What is the difference?
It's semantics, I think.
It's semantics, it's a play on words, and I think it hoodwinks people as well, who are gullible enough to believe this word salad that we unfortunately get a lot from our politicians and even our civil authorities, apparently.
And Maltese, we have a phrase, "daħ fil-wiċċ," like they're
Exactly.
laughing in your face. That's exactly what they're doing. Because, when it's election time and they're knocking on your door and they want to present themselves as holier than thou, and I'm not saying about one political party or the other, it's our whole class of politicians that do this. They tell you one thing and they present to you one thing, but effectively they're legislating another.
Exactly.
And that's my biggest...
We had Helena Dalli
Exactly.
say this explicitly while laughing about
Exactly.
the intelligence of the Maltese electorate and basically admitting that she hoodwinked her party,
Exactly.
hoodwinked the Maltese electorate into voting in certain gay rights,
Exactly.
LGBT rights, whatever.
And that's what's
And I'm
frustrating.
sure they
the famous package.
the package, quote unquote, and even Edward Zammit Lewis had made that quote about the Maltese Jahan.
Exactly.
It's the same thing basically. So the Maltese electorate is not capable enough. It's
Of
not
critical
sufficiently
thinking.
capable of thinking critically when it comes to whatever is being discussed at a national level. In this case, yes,
They
drug use.
mostly take electoral promises at face value and just stop there. They don't think about the implications or the details behind them.
But that's the frustration, I think. The ethical considerations, for example, with this whole cannabis debacle, is that most of the politicians have the ability, because of their personal professions, to send their children, for example, to private schools
Yep.
that are practically gated. But, the common folk, just the average Maltese family, and we're seeing the poverty line ever increasing each year. They don't have that luxury, They
Exactly.
send their children to normal schools. And if you're lucky, you go to a church school, and you can still go to a government school, don't get me wrong, and still have very good education. But, you're stuck at that level. So you send your children there, and they have to face these things. If we're talking about mass immigration, if we're talking about drug use, if we're talking about unclean streets,
Multiculturalism.
multiculturalism, I don't know, safety, all these things. Your children will face these problems.
Exactly.
Theirs will not. That
The
is why
worst
it's not an issue for them.
effects in a society are usually not felt by the legislators, but
Exactly.
Yep.
by the people who vote them in.
Very
Exactly.
true, very true. So I think that, it's more than ironic. It's, as you said, daħ fil-wiċċ to say that we never intended to normalize this. We just wanted to make it
Semantics.
legal and allow everyone to do what they
Exactly.
please, basically, within very limited amount of restrictions.
This is one of the symptoms of the normalization that we're talking about, in effect.
Exactly. And bouncing on what you said, Ben, just to change the topic a bit, you compared it to abortion legislation, for example. This week, one of the most, let's say, prominent newsreel highlight pieces that was seen is the EU Commission's, let's say, rather than decision, rewording that certain EU funds can be used to promote abortion access in any across, let's say, EU member states. And we saw various reactions, mostly from the pro-abortion groups in Malta locally that were, of course, elated at this news. We also saw different opinions, mixed opinions. I don't know. Personally, I've come to kind of take it for what it is. Like, I expect nothing better, unfortunately,
Yes.
that you arrive at that point where, what the EU was created for is being so misused and jumbled up that now you just learn to expect nothing better.
Yeah.
I don't know what your thoughts were personally.
Well, I completely agree with the last thing you said. So basically, we're at a point now where EU funds, and by that we mean
Taxes?
Yes,
Taxpayer
taxes
funds.
that we
Earn.
are contributing to. So every time we pay euro in taxes, part of it is going towards this. Basically, the situation now, as of yesterday, is that member states can make use of this taxpayer money funded through EU channels to supply abortion services, not just to their own citizens, which is already bad in itself, obviously, but also because of the nature of the European Union, to women from other member states, which would mean that Malta, where abortion is still illegal,
It's a criminal offense.
faces yes, it is a criminal offense. Is currently in a situation where its citizens can have access to EU-funded abortions in other member states. So it's subsidized, paid for, call it what you like, encouraged by these funds. Now, it's up to each member state to decide whether or not to use these specific funds for these purposes. So Italy, for example, might say, look, even though the Commission said I can use these funds for this purpose, I still won't. So technically, every member state, including Malta, yes, can refuse to do that. And Malta will refuse to do that because we don't have the infrastructure, the medical infrastructure, to conduct abortions in Malta, and it's still illegal. But there are many other countries where it's not just not illegal, but very easy to procure and access. So it is very damning to the current state of the European Union that we are taking taxpayer money and starting to use it to kill unborn children, because that is what abortion is. And I dislike euphemisms and play on words, so let's call it what it is. We're taking your money to kill European children.
No, in fact, I saw an article, I forgot which news site it was, but the first, so you know how an article would have a headline and then it would have a subheader. The subheader literally said, it was discussing the content, it said the right to end pregnancies. That, if that is not semantics, I don't know what is. The right to end the pregnancy means the right
to kill a child.
If you're ending the development of an embryo or a fetus, you're killing it. There's no way to go about it. So it's this constant use of semantics and play on words by this lobby that's just really, really frustrating to see.
I think that most important definition that needs to be used here is that, and acknowledgements, is that whoever is in favor of abortion needs to admit that he or she is in favor of killing a human person. And the important word here is human person, because sometimes these people like to play with words and also trying to include a bit of biology and sociology with it to try and define what is a human being. Does a fetus have the same rights as a baby, and does it have the same rights as a functioning human being? Now, when you start drawing comparisons between these stages in life, that is a very dangerous line that we're going down, because it does not just affect the human person, the preborn. It is something that affects you even after birth. Then we talk about euthanasia, for example. Essentially, the definition should not be human beings and all this and the sociological, biological cases. It should always go down to, and this is why for most of human history, abortion has always occurred, even in the ancient world. It was something that was practiced, you know. So, for example, in the ancient Roman and Greco world, you had infants which were deemed not useful, thrown in
girls
streets.
Most often,
Girls
and they
most
called it
often.
exposure.
Exactly.
They would let them die of exposure.
And it was effectively, and this is something I think it used to be practiced in China with the one-child policy. I don't know if it's...
even in India.
And in India, most abortions happen on girls, for example, I think. It's important to acknowledge, and we'll come to the EU about this as well, that the primary force which enacted protection of all human persons in the world, the only force that's ever done that, was Christianity.
Yes.
And it is because we used to see the human person as that created in the image of God and endowed with these natural rights. One of them is the right to life. That abortion, up until some tens of years ago, was deemed to be unacceptable, even unthinkable. And that brings me to the current state of the EU and this legislation that was proposed, this package of funds, or what it is, that you have the old continent of Christendom actively promoting, subsidizing the opportunities for women, for mothers, because all pregnant women are mothers at the end of the day, to terminate their babies effectively. Now, be it a fetus at the first few weeks, or be it a more developed baby 7 months in advance, it's still a human person at the end of the day. And I think it's also a poor reflection on, from a political perspective, on the demographic crisis which is affecting Europe at this day and age, where you have a decline in the general European population, where demographic pyramids are being inverted, where there are more elderly people than there are young people, putting a strain on the pension system and other social services, and also bring the idea of bringing in third country nationals to fill in the gap, where that gap could have been filled, in my opinion, with the thousands of abortions that happen across Europe. Millions every year. I think in the UK alone, some 1 million abortions happen every year, I think. I could be... well, the number wouldn't be far away from it, but I saw an estimate, I think, that there were, on the UK alone, in a certain amount, in a short time frame, some millions of abortions had happened, which it's very sad, a sad state to see, I think. And I think that the only way that abortion can be fully stopped from being something that is not just practiced but also promoted is if the continent of Europe rediscovers its Christian roots, and with that rediscovers as well the true meaning and the true definition of what a human person is.
I think just to kind of carry where we were saying, locally we tend to have the, I don't know how to describe it, but the tendency, let's say, to blame the government for everything. So the government is the one legislating, it passes laws, we blame them. I tend to see it more holistically as parliament. So government in Malta is made, of two main parties. You have a main party and an opposition party. And in this case, you would expect that the opposition party, that is the party more traditionally center-right, that is more affiliated with, preserving these natural laws and personhood itself, would be more on the defense of human life, really. But what we've seen lately, especially in the last month, is just either a lack of understanding from genuine ignorance or a willingness, which is more sinister, I think, to simply ignore or even open up a channel for, a wider acceptance of these things, such as the criminalization of abortion.
Exactly.
If you'd like to.
The leader of the opposition
Exactly.
recently said that, I forgot the exact words, maybe I'm misquoting, but it was something to the effect of, I'm not in favor of having women sent to jail. He was hesitant about whether or not the law should be changed, but he made the point that sort of no woman should be sent to jail or something to this effect.
But if you disagree with a punishment being effective, then you're disagreeing.
Back to what we were saying about cannabis.
Exactly.
Back to what we were saying about cannabis. The law as it is, by the way, already allows the courts to be nuanced with separate cases depending on the different circumstances. So a judge might have an abortion case and recognize that there were various mitigating factors that reduce the woman's culpability and might choose not to impose any punishment or rather reduce it. So it's not as if, in fact, there is absolutely nobody who is currently in jail because of the crime of abortion, notwithstanding the fact that we do have court cases about this subject.
That's why courts exist, because you have to leave them at their discretion to make the decisions.
But if you remove the punishment from the law, then what deterrent is there?
Nothing. There's no law.
Especially with this development that we're discussing right now, with European funds being allocated, potentially being utilized for this purpose. So whenever you hear politicians especially, but even non-politicians, including lobby groups, talking about decriminalizing something as if there is a difference between that and normalizing that same evil, just keep in mind that they are playing you like a fiddle, basically. I mean, it's
semantics again.
Semantics. They're taking you for a ride. So just keep your eyes open and your intellect sharp about these things.
And unfortunately, I do believe that this issue will persist and get tougher in the years ahead, in my opinion, especially because um, throughout the past, I wouldn't say the last 15 years, but it's much deeper than that, but at least during the last 15 years, there was a very explicit, I think, de-Christianization of the way that the general population here views political life, so to say. I think that is something that had already begun previously in the 1960s.
Previous administrations, for example.
Especially under certain socialist governments. However, I think that the past 15 years that has been accelerated to an extent where the revolution that Malta witnessed, the social revolution Malta witnessed, especially under the Joseph Muscat administration, etc., was so rapid that it effectively shocked a number of people. It turned us into one of the most progressive nations when it comes to civil liberties. The funny thing is that abortion is still opposed by the vast majority of the population for the time being. Hopefully it stays that way. However, I am skeptical about it for one simple reason, and it is that we speak about parliament, opposition party, the government, etc. However, we must keep in mind that politics is always downstream from culture, and culture is always downstream from theology. Now, the fact that the moral influence, I think, of the Catholic Church in Malta has been vastly reduced in recent years, be it for political reasons and also because the Church itself, at least in my view,
has withdrawn a bit, maybe. From
yes, I think it has withdrawn a bit, and it's in a state where I don't know.
It's a vacuum, maybe.
It doesn't seem to be making much of a difference in the lives, in the political sphere at least. You will have these letters from the bishops, the pastoral letters, from time to time. From time to time, the bishop will make some comments, but usually I don't think they're as vociferous as they ought to be at times. And I think that will lead to further de-Christianization of the society. So in effect, it will secularize further the culture that we're already living in, which is basically market dominated these days, commercialized, materialist, etc. And in turn, it will affect the politics that are a reflection of this culture. So I think that although we tend to think of political solutions as these quick fix solutions to society, and this is something that comes even from our right-wing conservative Catholic spheres, where we expect, for example, I don't know, we will have a Trump as a sort of messiah who will save us from the liberals, but at the same time, although when in office they do enact laws which go against the liberal current, the general culture is still a secular and liberal culture.
And that is where the main battle needs to be fought.
And that's the main
Changing
battle
the
that needs to
culture.
be fought, exactly.
Politics, as you said, the change there would come about as a result of the change in culture.
Exactly. And that is something that I think that the Labour administration took advantage of when it came into power in 2013. And that the previous Nationalist administration did not seek to affirm. Post-1987, they fought the political battle for democracy and all that. Free markets. But it stopped there. There was no cultural battle. If there was a cultural battle, first of all, the PN today would be in a stronger position. They would have a more solid ideology, and the Labour Party, although I think that they would still have become a sort of copy of Tony Blair's New Labour, I don't think they would have had the extreme influence and power that they have today. And that is the sad.
Because there would have been a
There would have been a
counterweight.
very strong counterweight.
But that's what's very worrying, I think. Across Europe, we're seeing countries turning towards the right. So we see several right-wing governments that are, increasing its votes, increasing its polling. But in Malta, we simply don't have that. So whilst Europe seems to be shifting right, we do not have that. Why don't we have that? Is it because, our Labour government are going so well that the population are genuinely pleased? Or is it because there is no viable alternative?
In fact, sorry to interrupt.
No, not a problem, go.
I was pleased in a way, but also sad to read a Reuters article about this European funding issue that we were talking about, that specifically spoke about rightist opposition to this development throughout Europe. And it specifically even mentioned that there were concerns that this new development will continue undermining European Christian values. This was a Reuters article. I read this and I was pleased because at least it acknowledged that there exist rightist political positions which oppose abortion and that there is also a threat to Christian values. But then I realized that it might apply, I don't know, to Poland or other places in Europe, but what they said barely registers in Malta. I mean, where is the rightist opposition in Malta? No. Where is the concern about Christian values in Malta to this development, I mean? I don't know, I barely heard any.
I think you can really anchor this in our political class and where it's heading. So I genuinely think that the main problem is that our political class is simply not well read. So when it comes, especially, I have a very big criticism, of course, of the right in Malta, because it simply, one, does not exist. So we just ground themselves in being wishy-washy, and it flows with whatever is happening, whatever they think that makes them a catch-all party, which is so unhealthy, and it simply dilutes the message. And again, as I was saying, politicians are not well read. So how many politicians can we say that have actually, read the most important books? There's no need even to mention them. Or the writers, or even like you were saying, papal encyclicals. No one. I mean, you speak to them and they don't even know what right and left is.
What we have
it's a very sad situation.
Dominant of nostalgics posing as right-wing nationalists.
When we talk about maybe more hardline right, but if we talk about the main opposition party, it's simply diluted. Right. There's no substance coming out of it. We were having a conversation.
Call them rights. I mean,
exactly, but even we were having a conversation. We were having a conversation recently talking about, I think it was monuments and publications about personas that are rather nationalistic. Who's publishing and who's building the monuments? The more left-leaning party. Yes. When do you ever see the right-leaning party commemorate even its founders and pay respect more than just a Facebook post?
If you see,
it's ridiculous.
If you see Castile, it's almost like the Red Square in Moscow. These
Mentov, Carmen Bonici, Paolo Boffa.
But they're commemorating, they remember, the right does not.
Manuel Demek, there's only Borch Olivier, he's getting a bit lonely there.
Although, to be fair, with Boffa, maybe I wouldn't lump him with Mentov and Manuel
Demek.
No,
definitely
but he's still a labourer.
Yes.
Person. Let's see.
But it's very frustrating to see that the history is left to the left instead of the right.
Exactly.
When the right have such a vast history, especially a party like the Nationalist Party, and even if you go to the archives...
That's the problem in Malta, I think.
There's so much to learn, even from the old...
That's the party which was supposed to safeguard our national Catholic values has practically abandoned them.
Yes. The whole cultural and historical narrative of our country is written by the left. That is the sad truth.
Yes.
And even people who are politically to the right, let's say they support the Nationalist Party, are also imbued, without even knowing that they are, with this leftist lens of Maltese history and world history. When you hear them talk about recent events or even slightly more to the past, it's all liberal and leftist.
Exactly.
It's the Labour mantra of equality and social progress and progressivism, etc., has been completely
absorbed,
transposed to the right of our political spectrum.
In fact, when he was interviewed once, Herbert Ganado had stated that for Mentov supporters, Malta was born during the first administration of Dom Mentov.
Yes.
And 1950s, I think it was. And I think it's true that most people believe that Malta began under Domintov, so to say, modern Malta. That's why they say Missirna il-Perit, our father.
Salvatur, our savior.
Our savior. He's not my savior, but if it were kept to that segment of the population, I think I would understand it to a certain point. The problem is that narrative has come to dictate the entire national narrative,
Yes.
and not just a segment of the population that supports the Labour Party. And that is, I think, the failing of two entities, the Nationalist Party and the Catholic Church in Malta,
Definitely.
which have basically bowed down and said, do what you will.
And we've forgotten our own history, and
Such
we've
a
lost
rich
our own
history.
heroes. Yes.
Even the party itself has forgotten its own history.
Yes.
I mean, that just shows you which state they degenerated into.
I mean, it's kind of comical and very, very sad if you think about it too hard, that the party that was consecrated to the Immaculate Heart, if I'm not mistaken, in 1927,
the Sacred Heart of Jesus.
Exactly,
Yes.
to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, excuse me, in 27 or 28. I can guarantee you that it's somewhere collecting dust, and I wish to be wrong, so I very much wish to see the party kind of commemorate the centenary of this event. But I can guarantee that even if they do,
Hardly.
it will be
It will mean nothing.
it will be mocking, because
Yes,
how can
true.
you stand for something? I mean, even, we speak so much about their slogan, Religio Patria, and I'm at the point where I just wish that they remove it. If they do not know where they're
They're
heading,
more likely to commemorate some
it's absurd.
LGBT or whatever movement that was born 100 years ago in some...
I think they think sometimes that their history starts from independence, when their founders are the ones that
Not
actually
even independence,
built,
I think,
but
these days.
their founders are the ones that actually built Malta into like a self-governing country, and they've simply left it to collect dust. It's very, very frustrating to see. And now with an election probably so closely, it's creeping up on us. I genuinely don't know personally as a voter what I'm meant to do. So what do? Do you vote for the lesser of two evils? Do you vote for an extremist party just because they're maybe right, but in reality they're so right they're left? It's like a shoe.
That's, I think, one
shoe.
of the main issues in Malta is that genuine Catholics don't really have a
party to
parent
call home.
party to vote for, the Movimentazione Soċjali, it's a social movement, it's not a party. And the aspirations are that from this building we can perhaps influence future politicians to seek their political ideology rooted in Catholic social teaching and all this.
Yes.
However, for the time being, I think that Catholic voters, genuine Catholic voters, are orphans, political orphans here.
And the truth is that, yes, there was this big failure or even betrayal on the part of the Nationalist Party by allowing its own identity to be lost and diluted and even taken over by a hostile ideology. But there was also a failure on the part of those who are duty-bound to form the national consciousness and even the individual consciences. I'm talking about the Catholic Church,
Yes,
as you mentioned.
yes.
And the truth is that none of us are part of the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, and we don't aspire to be, and we can't be. But it has to come from there, primarily, just as it happened 2,000 years ago, and throughout our entire Christian history. It has always been the Church that was the prime mover of culture. So before it starts from there, then unfortunately, I don't think much can happen. But
Still,
that said,
it still starts from us to a certain
yes, exactly.
extent.
That's what I was coming to. That said, the church is not just the hierarchy. We are also part of the
Yes,
church,
yes.
and we're also called to use our intellect, our will,
We're
our
duty-bound to a certain point.
gifts from God as well. Especially if someone is interested in politics and capable in that art, to educate himself, yes, in these
Yes.
fundamentals, and that's not happening either. So.
But I think
we need more effort.
Bouncing on what you said, though, I completely agree that we are duty-bound as Catholics of goodwill to, make the effort ourselves. But it's so frustrating, I mean, for me at least, to be the one constantly on the line defending your position as a Catholic when the Catholic, church itself
The
is
hierarchy.
not defending you and is not defending religion itself. So when we had Pope Francis' administration, let's call it an administration for
It
what
was
it is.
difficult.
It was very difficult. I mean, confusion. It's like you're defending an old
was a test
church,
of faith
and
to a
they're
certain extent.
exactly, and they're promoting a new church. And locally, we see it kind of with the church being silent. For me, it's an answer in itself. Silence is an answer, and it's very frustrating that you don't have kind of the church to back you up on these issues. If anything, sometimes, very sad to say, it kind of distances itself. I don't know whether because it genuinely thinks, or maybe the administration genuinely think at the Korea that it's better to not speak about issues because of Malta's history with the church and politics, or whether it's intentional, and because there's certain different ideas. After
Streams.
all, exactly, political ideas are human, I mean, we derive...
Even within the church.
Exactly. So it's kind of very difficult to put yourself out there when your own, party, in this case the church, is not defending itself.
I mean, having commentators on the church's radio who are openly left-wing and atheists,
Yes,
it's not.
yes,
It sends a message.
It doesn't bode well.
It's a very big problem and very painful to faithful Catholics.
And not only that, genuine traditional Catholics are frowned upon
Or
as
sidelined.
as extremists and all this nonsense.
Yeah.
And I think there's also a constant push against things that have to do with Catholicism, materialistic things. Even, for example, I remember, I think it was a few months ago, we had a whole discussion about a new monument being built to honor Mary. And again, commentators that have radio spots that are very left-leaning were so scandalized by this. I mean, how can you be funded or be given a platform to speak about things, and then you're allowed to say exactly the opposite of what the institution stands for? How is that allowed, And then, like you were saying, right-wing, or let's say just Catholics, just good Catholics that are living according to social dogma, are frowned upon.
Yeah. Even this thing about left and right, just as a quick comment, it's funny a bit that we identify with the right, but it's not the case that we seek that label.
Of course.
It's been thrust upon us because of historical happenstance.
The French Revolution.
Because of the French Revolution, every time society took a new turn away from the Christian fundamentals that bounded us together before, that meant that those who resisted that revolutionary thrust were more conservative than the rest, which in terms of political parties is
a good
considered on the right. So we are rightist, not by
our beliefs.
Some kind of it's not a partisan thing. No. It's because we are resisting the continuous march of the revolution.
It's just common sense. It's grounded in natural
our beliefs
law.
Exactly.
In actual fact, they transcend the traditional
for sure,
left and right.
And I don't really like it so much.
We just happen to end up in the right wing because
we are resisting. That's the only reason.
Third positionist in a way. We do not conform to one thing or the other in reality.
You can call it that.
It's because the way that the French Revolution essentially developed was such that those who were more revolutionary would sit on the left of the speaker, I mean vis-a-vis the speaker, whilst those who rejected the advances of the revolution, the counter-revolutionaries, the conservative ones, would sit to the right. And we kept this dynamic of these two words. Basically, it's just words essentially, right and left. Essentially, one is more socially revolutionary, the other is more socially conservative. And when we use the term conservative here, we're talking about preserving Christian culture, Christian values, natural law. Basically, that's what it's about. It's not even about economics. Economics is just a result of that.
Briefly, because I think we're getting towards the end of our program. We discussed a lot, we focused a lot about the political scene, but also politicians, which way they're heading, where their momentous comes from. If from your own positions and your own interactions, let's say, with politicians, if there could be one message, or rather one thing you could pass on to politicians, or where you wish to see the political class heading or changing, and very briefly, what would be, where would you start from? What would be your standpoints?
My heartfelt appeal would be especially directed towards those who consider themselves Catholic. If you don't, then I mean, do what you think is best. But for those who consider themselves Catholic, I really, really, really implore them to look into their faith with a deeper analysis. So don't remain superficial, because your faith, our faith, calls us for much more than just superficial adherence. Just going to mass on Sundays, for those who still do that, is the barest of bare minimums. As a politician, you have a higher obligation than that. You need to be very well grounded in Catholic theology, in Catholic social teaching especially. So when you go out there and present yourself to the public and expect their vote and eventually receive it and end up in Parliament, you have a very grave duty in front of God.
Yes.
And this is immensely serious, I mean, for your own soul. And even for the rest of us, by the way, because we depend on what you do in Parliament. So please take it seriously, very seriously, as a Catholic, especially. Even if you're not, mind you, but especially as a Catholic. Ground yourself in Catholic social teaching. Understand what the historical vicissitudes were that resulted in the current political situation, what left and right mean, where they originated from, where they're heading, what they mean. It's not acceptable not to understand these things or to be able to converse like we do on this table here. And unfortunately, most politicians are not able to hold this level of discussion. And I'm not saying that this is some kind of high-level discussion. It's absolutely not. It's very basic stuff.
Bare minimum, like you were saying.
Bare minimum. Most Maltese politicians will not be able to hold this level of discussion. It is a very, very sad testament to our current situation. So, yes, my appeal is that please take it upon yourselves, because you have a grave duty in front of God and in front of the citizens who elect you and who pay your salary to deepen your understanding of these things. That's my appeal.
Perfect.
I think what Benjamin said was fully correct. My opinion is that we have a political class that has no class at all. So I don't know how many of our politicians in Parliament actually, the last time they grabbed a book and they read it in their life. Any book, I think, would do at this point. Politics in Malta has become transactional, I think. It's not based on visions anymore. It's not based on ideals. It's not based on belief in anything. It's purely transactional, and it's basically a career move, I think, in my opinion. The few ideological people who exist in Parliament are just used as sort of useful idiots in order to advance certain ideological positions, but also for certain groups of people to effectively gain money. And I think overall, there's no the biggest problem we have in Malta, politically speaking, is that there is no real. It's known as a Hegelian dialect. The idea that there is a thesis and an antithesis, and then from that a synthesis is produced. But in my view, that there cannot be something of the sort. One, because as we stated, we only have one dominant political culture, and that is dominated by the left and the storyline of the Labour Party, which good for them. But I think it's up to us, and it's up to genuine Catholics and genuine patriots as well, not this superficial twisties, bastits patriotism, Viva Malta, will Malti, you know. But to actually rediscover, for us, we have such a rich history when it comes to Catholic movements, nationalist movements in Malta, that we've sort of abandoned everything to the dust and let our ideological enemy, and when I say our, I don't mean a particular party, I mean our as people who actually want to defend Catholic civilization on this island, dictate everything for us. and we just sit there and say nothing.
Yeah.
And I think that is an issue. So I think that it's up to people like ourselves and the Movimentazzjoni Soċjali in general and other movements with a similar mission to it to continue with what we are currently doing and try as much as possible within our limits to disseminate this knowledge which has been lost to history in Malta, unfortunately.
Just ended off maybe with my very brief thoughts. For me, it's quite simple. It's just be who you want to be. I know that sounds so liberal, but I am so over politicians parading as one thing and then legislating as another. If you want to be liberal, be liberal. If a whole party wants to move to the left, move to the left, so be it. It does not matter. I still feel like I'm derelict and I have no political home. Do what you want to do, but simply don't laugh in people's faces. You want to vote one way, that's fine by me, but then admit that you think this way. If you want to vote in favor of cannabis legislation, just say that you're pro-cannabis. Just say it, you know. I mean, I can look at you in the eye and realize you're lying to me, but unfortunately, maybe the general population do not have that capability, and it is not the general population's fault necessarily, but I think it is our education system and the political class being very happy with a lack of critical thinking. So for politicians, my message would just simply be what you want to be. Admit it. Okay. Thank you very much. So that is the ending to our second episode of MASpresso. It will be available on online platforms, including YouTube and Facebook. Follow us there at Movimentazzjoni Soċjali, and we'll see you for our third podcast. See you.